Hello and welcome to this fireside chat. I'm your host for this segment, Anthony Smith, lead economist and strategic executive producer here at FreightWaves, and I have the honor to be chatting here with Çetin Merçili of Locomotive, CEO and founder. Thank you so much for your time today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, just jumping into things, because we had a chance to just kind of chat before this whole interview, and one of the things that came up was your background. You have a background in academia. We're going to get into the origin story of where you are right now, but can you kind of give us a quick backstory on just how you came to this position, some of your studies along the way?
Of course, my formal background is in computer science with a focus on AI and robotics. Very, very early on when I was a kid, I developed an interest into computers, and I started playing with the computers, programming computers. Very quickly, I started venturing into the realm of, okay, so what if the computers could decide by themselves, make decisions by themselves? And even that was not super sufficient very quick. So I got an interest into robots, thinking of their own, doing some tasks, meaningful tasks, sometimes alone and sometimes as groups of like teams of robots. That effectively set my research interests and research passion for the next almost 2 decades. After my bachelor's, I started doing my master's and then my PhD, again, all around robotics and all around intelligent robots. About 10 years ago, my academic studies brought me to Carnegie Mellon University, my childhood dream, basically. So I got the privilege to work with the best and brightest of robotics and AI here. Spent almost a decade here, had the privilege and chance to contribute to many projects, learn an enormous amount of know-how, an enormous amount of know-how not to. We tried a bunch of things, some of that worked, some of that did not work. I always had an interest in the systems, so I was always invested in building complete systems to solve real-world problems. CMU was the perfect place in the world for that. I met my today's co-founders at CMU. We worked again close to a decade together, from project to project. Had fantastic time, and in the end, we liked each other enough so that we decided to start a company together. So that's how Locomation was born.
Excellent. And so, with what Locomation does, we're looking at primarily autonomous vehicles and transport as it relates to transportation logistics. But it seems like everything that you just kind of gave us a backdrop of led to this whole thing coming together. Can you talk to us a little bit about Locomation and the story behind that coming together?
Of course. So in a nutshell, Locomation develops autonomous driving technologies with a focus on semi-trucks, and furthermore, with a near-term concept of operation around human-guided convoying. So we are building self-driving trucks, but instead of immediately deploying self-driving trucks alone in a completely humanless fashion, we came up with this human-guided autonomous convoy idea, where a convoy of 2 trucks, maybe in the future 3 trucks as well, there's a human driver in the front truck, completely in control, driving manually just like they do today. And the second truck in the convoy is a self-driving truck, but it's a self-driving truck as long as it stays behind this human leader. So it makes the life of the autonomy a little bit easier, a little bit safer, so that it can be commercialized faster. This is our starting point, and using it as a springboard, if you will, we will be collecting a lot of validation data and getting a lot of real-world exposure to further develop and harden our self-driving stack, so that one day we can actually deploy self-driving trucks at scale. So when we were starting Locomation, coming from a background like ours, we've developed and fielded over 50 autonomous systems. So we could have gone either way. When we were starting, the hot topic was the robotaxi applications. When we looked at what we should do with Locomation, do we go and try to solve the robotaxi problem first? or do we go after the freight automation part? It was very, very apparent to us very quickly that freight automation is the first truly viable commercial application of self-driving technologies. That's where the opportunity is, that's where the big pain points are, and with a proper, prudent, and responsible deployment of technology, every single stakeholder involved in supply chain today can benefit from it. That was too compelling to pass on, so very quickly we decided that, okay, Locomation is going to start by focusing on freight automation, self-driving trucks, and furthermore, our beachhead is going to be human-guided autonomous convoying.
Got it. And you mentioned, so it's impressive that you look at what's going to be the almost the most complicated and the hardest problem to solve and to attack that one first, and admirable with your approach with that. And you talk about some of the pain points along the, the trials and tribulations and things like that. What were some of the things that popped up along the development and the continuous development of Locomation that you had to address and kind of think about?
Um, Full disclosure, as I said, I don't come from logistics or trucking background, and none of my founders did either. So we knew how to build robots, but we did know very little about trucking or supply chain in general. So when we started examining the industry, one thing that was very clear very early on was that there is a significant efficiency problem. There's a significant asset utilization problem, and assets in this question are not just the trucks. The truck utilization is, of course, very low. I think the industry average is around 30% or so, but the driver utilization is also suboptimal. And to further complicate things, there is a growing pain around skilled driver shortage, especially in the long haul driving segment. So when you look at a $1 trillion industry, when you look at the big boulder in that industry, that's the long haul trucking, and when you look at the most limited resource that are experienced and skilled drivers, and you identify a driver shortage there, you really don't need to look any further. So this is the core problem that you should start focusing on. And this is not about completely replacing the drivers or eliminating jobs or anything like that. This is about how do we get our current pool of drivers, how do we make the driving job safer, more comfortable, and improve the quality of life so that we can actually have more drivers, and how can we make sure that we get the best utilization and best yield out of both our drivers and existing trucks. So that was the North Star or the guiding principle. And it was very apparent, you really didn't have to be a supply chain guru to see that, okay, so there's a $1 trillion market and there's a pain. It's happening today. It's not 5 years, 10 years down the road. Something has to be done now. The fuse is really short there. So that was our biggest motivating factor. And to this date, that's still what gets us very excited and very invested in this field.
And one of the things I love that you mentioned was that this is to also help current drivers right now, not just only from a safety, but from an efficiency standpoint. Did you face a lot of resistance early on to potentially, hey, this is going to replace humans, as opposed to this is going to help make people, more efficient and kind of help them out along the way?
We one-on-one we did not face that resistance directly, but there is that kind of a background concern when you ask people. Some people are kind of overestimating where the technology is today, and the real deployment rate of the technology that is coming down the road. One thing that's very clear when you actually sit down and do an analysis is that even if we get everything completely right, and even if we have magical wands and we can solve all the technology problems today, it's going to take decades to replace all the current trucks and the current supply chain and completely automate them. And you and I both know that we are not there yet. There's still technology work to be done. There is still social acceptance work to be done. There is still educational work to be done. So this is a multi-generational problem. I think it is very, very clear, and I can say that very confidently. eliminating jobs is not a concern of today's supply chain people, drivers or carriers or shippers. Maybe one day we'll get to a point where it just makes sense to automate all the driving job. Then it's a different question. But this is so far into the future. We don't basically know what the future holds. So it is a little bit of a kind of a Terminator scenario. We are all afraid of AI uprising and coming after us and killing all of us. It's really the machines are really not there. Humans are still we are not best at everything. We cannot be the calculator in computing some number crunching stuff, but we still have our edge, and we will continue to have our special place in this ecosystem.
And I think that's an excellent point, and that leads me to the next question I really had is, I mean, you've been, a student of technology essentially your entire life. You've grown up with it. You've watched it develop in front of your eyes. Your idea or your thoughts on the pace of technology and I guess where we are now. I think you alluded to it is like we're not there yet where everything's just going to be automated. Do you ever feel any kind of sense of impatience, or are things developing faster than you anticipated when you're looking at the rate of technology?
The devil is always in the details, and there's always way more work than you originally anticipated. So we are definitely, don't get me wrong, we've been making tremendous progress. And by we, I'm not just talking about Locomation, I'm talking about as a community, as I'm talking about other developers of self-driving technology as well. There has been enormous progress, but there is just a mountain of work still needs to be done. Here's an interesting thing. People usually tend to overestimate the impact of technology in the short term and underestimate the impact of the technology in the long term. So when we get very excited about a new piece of technology, there's like a little hype around it. Everybody gets carried away too much by their emotions and expect massive shifts to happen overnight. But in reality, it actually takes time. Even if everything goes right, it takes a very long time for physical things to be adopted by people and the real world. But in, say, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road, we can't even imagine what might happen 30 years from today. It's simply beyond. I mean, if you go back 30 years, none of us could have imagined really smartphones or satellite internet or any of the things that we take as granted today. So that's something to keep in mind.
Definitely. I mean, as you mentioned, there's so many unknown unknowns of what's going to be a possibility in the next 10, 20, 30 years, certainly. As you, work with, Locomation and its progress, you kind of mentioned it. Did you have any, or are you currently, I guess, constantly always looking a way to temper expectations and really kind of provide, these are realistic benchmarks? And if so, what are some of the benchmarks that you're hoping to hit in the next 5 years or 10 years?
Um, the list is simply too long, but let me tell you a little bit about our overall philosophy around it. We really believe in truly open and transparent communication. We always communicate with all the stakeholders what we think is possible today, where we think we are today, what we think is still remaining work, what are the known unknowns. So there are always a set of questions that we know that we will have to answer, but maybe we don't have the answer yet. And there's always a little bit of room for unknown unknowns. We don't even know what we don't know. The key is to always be very open and honest with yourself and with customers, with other stakeholders, with everybody in the ecosystem. That's our way of basically telling them what we know at any given time. This might be different tomorrow because we will learn something new tomorrow, and we might come back and revise our statements, but we will always be open and very transparent. Now that sometimes goes against the set expectations, because especially in our field, in self-driving vehicles, in the past several years, several high profile, let me put it that way, large organizations, a lot of engineers, a lot of investment dollars have been working on coming up with KPIs or metrics to actually continuously show progress and uh, communicate how they are better than some other people, etc. But most of these metrics so far are vanity metrics. They are not completely useless, but just by looking at a metric, it is almost impossible to infer the true state of the technology maturity. Uh, it's you can call it a blessing or you can call it a curse, up to you. But today, demonstrating the core self-driving functionalities is highly democratized. Anyone with an access to an experimental platform, truck or passenger vehicle, and a sufficient knowledge of how to use internet can actually get a self-driving demo together in the order of maybe a couple of weeks or months. And when you put in that little effort and get that level of demonstration performance, it's usually very impressive. And that's also misleading because people expect the progress to continue at that rate. But the gap between demonstrations and prototypes and an actual product oftentimes lies in the unseen parts of the iceberg. So with the demonstrations and with these metrics, with the demo rights that we can give to the customers, etc., all you can see is what is visible to your eye. But the real delta, the real gap between the product and a prototype often happens under the hood. That's not visible to the eye, that's not as sexy, but it is just a grunting work you just need to get done.
And so one of the things I really admire that you just said is, not getting lost in those vanity metrics. It seems like, you and your team have this guiding light of wanting to serve the industry and the community the best you can and the most efficiently and solve this problem to the best of your ability and really kind of attacking it from that front as opposed to getting lost in these little vanity metrics that really kind of throw you off track from time to time. Curious with your community and this industry that you're in. You mentioned that you don't have exactly a freight background. Have there been any surprising partnerships that have come together through your time here at Locomation?
Oh, I mean, the very first thing we did was to acknowledge that we don't know what we don't know as the founding team. We know how to build robots, but we don't know supply chain, we don't know freight networks, we don't know trucking industry. So we basically started by building our team towards that. And we've been extremely lucky and extremely privileged to have joined by several industry legends, extremely experienced people coming from both freight optimization background and trucking, launching trucking products, launching technology products for trucking fleets background. So now we actually have cradle to grave coverage. Now we have an unmatched amount of experience from first principles all the way down to the nuts and bolts in all three dimensions. The technology part, we know the science, we know the complex systems engineering. On the freight part, we know why and where and how the freight moves, and we know how to operationalize it and how to optimize for it. From a product point of view, we know what the fleets need, what are the burning desires, and what is the right way of packaging the right combination of technology, operational support, and backend support into a frictionless package so that we can actually make the lives of our customers much better. So it is not just a technology play. This is not just we are building a little technology nugget and people will go figure out how to use it. We will help them getting the best out of that technology.
And it rings some similarities here to what we do at FreightWaves. Craig Fuller, the CEO, always talks about bringing these intelligent subject matter experts, these data-driven individuals, and then having them combined with what you would call tribal knowledge. And then those individuals have been within the industry for so long, and you bring the two together, and it really covers an amazing wide area of space and bringing that transparency and bringing that progress. Um, Curious about, so as we mentioned earlier, there's so many things that go into Locomation, and whether it's computer or imitation learning, machine learning, robot learning, all these different things. Is there one area in particularly that you're most excited about, whether it be robot learning or machine learning or different types of algorithms? And kind of culminating into this new technology?
Wonderful question. Uh, Briefly touching your previous point, I am a huge fan of Craig. I'm a huge fan of the Fuller family. I'm a huge fan of Eric as well. So I think it couldn't have resonated better. So we really see eye to eye in our overall approach from first principles all the way down to data driven solution providing. As far as the one single area that we are very excited about, there is no single area. Uh, and that is a defining trait in our approach to autonomy. We don't believe in sledgehammers. We don't think that there is a silver bullet. There's one piece of technology that if you do it way better than anybody else, it is guaranteed that you're gonna succeed. You're gonna win. We are talking about really really complex systems engineering here, and we see ourselves more like carpenters rather than Thor with a sledgehammer. So we are carpenters and we are agnostic. We have a toolbox. We have many tools in it. Robot learning, machine learning, or traditional statistical methods, or motion planning, or you name it. These are all little tools in our toolbox. When we look at the problem that we set out to fix or solve, we look at our toolbox, and with a very agnostic, very objective, and with a very analytic eye, we pick the right tools for the right problem. If we don't have the tool in the toolbox, then we see how we can come up with the tool or we can make the tool better. But we don't think that there is a particular screwdriver that's my favorite and I should try to repair and fix everything just by using that screwdriver. And if it's not enough, I'm just going to build a bigger screwdriver and that's going to solve it. That's not a very healthy or very sustainable approach in our view. And again, this whole thing distills from our experience of this width and depth of our past experience. We've seen a lot. We've been through a lot of cycles. We've seen pieces of technologies becoming very fashionable and then falling off of grace and then maybe coming back again. So that all taught us that there are no silver bullets. Again, there is no free lunch. There are no silver bullets. You need to use the right tools for the right problems.
Exactly. And I think I love that point that you mentioned. There are some areas of technology that they become highly fashionable, and then it's almost like a trend, and then it falls and it's back in fashion. Are there any parts of, now you mentioned there's everything is important here from what you're putting forth together. Do you think that some other industries adjacent to Locomation will benefit from your work that you're doing right now?
Oh, absolutely. It's almost granted. So a couple of key contributions of AV development is going to be highly applicable in not just broader mobility applications, but a few other of applications as well. So from the sheer technology point of view, we have to solve not just instantaneous perception problem, but a semantic understanding and over time tracking and prediction problem as well. So it's not just enough to detect whether there's a pedestrian or whether there's a bicyclist. It's also important to be able to kind of infer or guesstimate what that individual is going to do over the next couple of seconds. And that's not a simple inference. That you have to take context into account. You have to take what else is going on in the scene into account, and you have to be able to define what context means. And these are very open problems mostly right now. There's constant progress, and we are making good strides at it, but it's not solved. So that's one end, like sheer innovation part of it. The second part of it is AV. Autonomous vehicles in general is a safety critical field. What we are doing has the responsibility. We are responsible against the general public. What we are doing, we are intending to replicate it and deploy in thousands or tens of thousands. It's going to be really ubiquitous, and it's going to touch the lives of regular people on the streets. So we need to make sure that it's our fiduciary duty. We need to make sure that everything we do is provably safe. It's not just our gut feeling. It's not just, yeah, I think I developed it right and it seemed okay to me. It's not like, it's beyond that. We have to have formal and or statistical evidence around its safety and reliability. And some of these frameworks or methods do exist, and we are heavily inspiring by them at Locomation. But some of them, especially when we start talking about fully solo driverless, completely unmanned deployment of self-driving vehicles, uh, a system-wide end-to-end safety validation framework does not exist yet. But throughout this process, we will devise methodologies and we will devise standards in assessing the safety and reliability of any given autonomous system, and come up with a quantitative, quantifiable proof of that. That is going to be highly transferable to other safety critical areas. One of the first industries comes to my mind is healthcare. It is if one day we would like to really leverage technology and AI and at least help doctors making better diagnoses, we need to make sure that whatever AI is presenting to the doctors to make the final call are provably reliable and consistent. That again is not does not exist today. We are everybody's working on that very active area, but we don't have a solution yet. If we can succeed in deployment of AVs in a safe and reliable fashion, it will indirectly mean that we figured out a way of proving the safety around these complex systems, and then those frameworks will be at disposal of adjacent fields or other industries.
Excellent. And I think I can only imagine the type of pressure and responsibility that your team is taking upon you to be industry leaders and additionally tackle these frameworks and develop it around these social contracts, because it's one thing to walk in the steps of someone else, but you're kind of in uncharted territory here when you're looking at this wide scale and this type of automation within the world and the impact it's going to have. We're coming up just on time here. I think this can go on for another hour or so because I'd love picking your brain here. But of course, Craig Fuller always asks, and I'm a huge fan of this question, could you make one wild prediction over the next year that you think is going to happen either within the industry or within technology?
Oh, that's a wonderful question, and that's very, very difficult. Um, well, I don't know about the exact year mark from today, but I think in the next 18 to 24 months, we will start seeing the first deployment of self-driving trucks. And well, it's not so wild part of that prediction is that's going to come from Locomation.
Beautiful.
That's going to open up the floodgates. I think it's going to have such a profound impact on the acceleration of technology development.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you. And thank you all so much for tuning in for this fireside chat. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll be sure to keep you posted on all the latest with Locomation and Çetin and his team. Thank you so much.